What's going on, family? Today we are going to talk about fatherhood and shadow work and why we can mesh both of them to connect more with our children and just to be better men and better dads in general. So, what is shadow work? I'm sure some of you may have heard of this term. Shadow work is basically work that you do to bring up things that we are scared to bring to the outside world about ourselves. So an easy way to put that is I don't want to show the world this side of me because I don't think A, they're going to perceive it well, or even better, B, it's really not aligning to how I truly want to be, who I truly want to be. And we are afraid to do that, right? We're imperfect. We're perfect, but on this plane, we do things that we would perceive as not good. And the reason why that is because we care so much about how the external views us. So words like angry, words like fear, words like ashamed, when we have these feelings, these emotions, we tend to repress them. We tend to like keep them on the inside, and that's why they're called shadows. Now, this was created, or the term was coined by a psychologist back in the day. His name was Carl Jung. I believe that's how you pronounce the last name, but you can Google it and research about it. And basically, a quote that he said that we're going to tie it into being dads is that he's like, yo, you know, all of this, I'm butchering this, I'm paraphrasing, but basically he's like, the real work starts when you make the unconscious become conscious. So what that means is, let's look at parenting. Why is it that if my son is complaining about something, or if he's not doing this, or if my daughter is crying too much, or my daughter is trying to get my attention too much, why do some of these things trigger us? That's making the unconscious conscious, because when it's unconscious, our kids do things and we just go, sometimes we go berserk, we snap, we react instead of respond. That's unconscious because we're just doing it without even realizing it. So making the unconscious conscious is basically, okay, when my son gives me pushback on this thing, why am I so triggered? That's the work. That's the important work, because I've said this on my podcast. In parenting and fatherhood, there are going to be things that, yes, things are going to be like, some things are going to be like, bro, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? This is the way it needs to be done. The problem is we tend to treat most things like that. The issue is there are some things that are way deeper. There are some things that happen and it's our reaction to it needs to be analyzed, and we don't take the time to do that, and then we just like continue a cycle of reactive parenting, reactive fatherhood, kind of like how we were raised. So the first thing I want to say is, when it comes to these shadows, is our kids reflect our shadows back to us, and that's why they trigger us so much. So I'll give you a very good example. My son, like a couple years ago, was very much ashamed of his last name, to the point where what he did was, his basketball team, they could have their names on the back of their jerseys. Unbeknownst to me, he specifically asked the coach or his mom to put the order in without his last name on the back. Now, when you hear that, you might think like, dang, does he not rock with his dad? Like, my son loves me to pieces. The problem is people make fun of his last name. His last name is McBean, right? You get it. People make fun of his last name. And when he first did that, I was heated. I was pissed. Why would you do that? Don't you realize what the last name means, and you got to wear that with pride? Like, going in on him. Triggered me. Now, the shadow work comes in when I sit back and realize, when I came to this country in the third grade from Jamaica, So many kids made fun of my last name. It wasn't even funny. People killed me for my last name. They said my last name sounded like a McDonald's sandwich, right? McBean. You know, I've even in my adult years of working, when I used to work in customer service, sometimes people would hear my last name, my first name too for that matter, and crack up over the phone. I got trauma with that. That's triggering. So now that my son is reflecting maybe some unresolved trauma with that, I just immediately snap at him. This is how this works, right? If you have a child that cries a lot, like let's say you grew up and you were told, stop this crying, bro. You cry too much. Da 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 da. Stop crying. Now, if your kid is crying, you think that you're mad and you're reactive to it and you're like, man, grow up, man up, or stop crying about everything. You think that you're trying to help them. But in reality, what you're doing is taking out the fact that when you were a child, you weren't able to emotionally express yourself. And now them crying is just bringing up that shadow. And you don't like that. We don't like that, right? Sometimes what they say is the man in the mirror, right? So sometimes when you face the man in the mirror, we don't like that. And obviously a lot of this stuff, most of the stuff is going to stem from childhood. But when you are doing the shadow work, you are now able to be consciously aware of what the root cause of your frustration is. And I'm here to tell you, I always say this, majority of the times it has nothing to do with your kids. They're just the vessels. They're just the gurus. They're just the teachers. But it has everything to do with you and when you were a child. You know, and you got to understand this. I say stuff like this, and sometimes people really resonate with it, and sometimes people they can't seem to grip it. But just try to think about this and own it. You are the adult and you are the child, right? You're still the child. We never want to admit that. And the reason why you're still the child is because we are walking around every day doing things, reacting in ways because they weren't satisfied, though they weren't met when we were kids. So clearly you're still a child because you're still holding on to what that person needed at 5. What you needed at 8, what you needed at 10, you're literally still holding on to it in your 30s. It doesn't come out that way. You don't think it comes out that way, but the way it shows itself is yelling at your kid because they cry too much. The way it shows itself is, you know, okay, this is another good example. At work, sometimes you may feel like you're not giving yourself, you're not maximizing your time, you're not maximizing your productivity. Like you feel like you're falling behind. The moment, the moment your child displays any type of laziness, any signs of laziness, you're gonna pounce, you're gonna react on them. This is like, this is by no way me talking about physical. This is just like hand motions. And when I say pounce, I don't mean literally. I mean like you're going to be very reactive if you think they're being lazy. But the real reason you're triggered by their laziness is because it's happening in your own life somewhere, in your own world, and your area in life. Some area in life you're being lazy, and your child is just going to be like a mirror reflection of that. So before I end this video, I think I want to tell you and be open-minded when it comes to all of this stuff, right? That's the point of this channel, is to grow together and to break generational cycles. So if you are okay, if you sit back and you just have an open mind and you are okay with admitting that oftentimes when you yell, when you get very triggered at your children, if you can admit that it's stemming from something that has absolutely nothing to do with them, you are already ahead of so many men, so many dads that are doing this on this journey. That's the first part, is to just sit back and be open-minded enough to admit that. That's called being self-aware. Now the real work starts, right? So before I leave, I will say that to you. I'm going to give you this challenge. Sit down and think, journal, and ask yourself, what are some things that my kids do that triggers me? And what does it say about me? What does it reveal about myself? And I guarantee you, you're going to start thinking about things that you're repressing, things that you're keeping, things that you're like acting like don't exist about in your own world, in your own life. And your kids are going to be a reflection of that, and it's going to trigger you. So how can we now move forward knowing this and be more understanding, be more compassionate, empathize more with our kids when they trigger us? Because now we're starting to realize the real source of our frustration. And that's all I got to say. I'm sending you all light. I appreciate everybody who watches my videos, everyone who visits my website, gets my journal, my TikTok, my podcast. I really just appreciate all of it. And I'm going to continue this because I think men need this, dads need this. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of spaces, communities, and environments that push this towards fathers. Sending you all light.